All right, so with this car, the biggest struggles that you have is on the rear end, where whenever you're on throttle in high-speed sections, the rear end always tends to step out, and that's if you build it stock. So the one of the most important things to do to it is on the rear, you need to get the toe links that give you 3 degrees of toe in, because that settles the rear end of the car when you're going into the corners. And another thing that happens in the rear end is that inside the differential, there's 2 shims that the manual tells you to put in, but the manual also tells you that the second shim is optional because it's meant for when you've had the car worn down. The gears are going to be worn down, so when they're new, what can happen is if you push in against the cups and you spin it, you'll feel it grind, and that means that the gears essentially, when there's the differential spinning as fast as it can, the center expands and the outsides contract, and that pushes the gears against it, and it acts like a handbrake, and it just skids your car out of the into a sweeper. And that doesn't usually happen when you're on the low speed corners because the differential is not expanding as much from the centrifugal forces. So what you can do is you can take out the 2 tiny shims, and when you take those out, your differential should spin really smooth, and you're not going to have that handbrake effect on it. And another thing with these cars is that since the battery usually sits in the rear, what ends up happening is that all your weight is back here in this section and not in the front. So when you use the springs, you want a harder spring in the rear and a softer spring in the front. And in the front, you can kind of play with the springs depending on whether the track is technical or fast. So a faster track, you're going to want a stiffer spring up front, but not stiffer than the rear, because when you have the front with this car, the idea is that you want the front end to have no grip. So in the front, I'm essentially running no camber. And another huge thing that helps is when you're steering, you get a lot of casters. So what you want to do is the front caster, you want to set up the shims that are down here so that you get the least amount of caster that you can. Because on the rear you're running 0, and on the front I think stock is like 5 degrees. So the most you can take it out is like 2 degrees. So when you're steering, your front end has no camber, which means you got no grip in the front, and that gives the rear all the grip. And then another thing that I see with a lot of people's cars is they tend to put the ESC
Orlando, Phillip,
on this
Jerry,
side,
Hector, Martinez,
and
Raj,
that ends up screwing up the whole car because now all your weight's on one side. So if you put the ESC on the other side, what you can do is the motor wires, you can solder them this way. And so with all that, that should be a basic setup that should help you prevent the oversteer.
Alright, thank you. What hop-ups do you have on there?
Hop-ups, the only ones I have are the middle or the bottom ones right here for the suspension mounts. And on the front steering, I only have the aluminum one because on the steering arms, and not the center one because the center one buckles. Don't get the center one. It doesn't have it has a hole in the middle. And of course shocks. That's about it. I try to avoid aluminum on as much as I can, mostly because it's heavy and it tends to break. So I only have aluminum for the parts that don't matter, like the battery holders, the front bumper. If those were to fail, the battery would still be in place, so you wouldn't have an issue.
Overall, how do you like this chassis?
It's pretty good. It's pretty fun. But yeah, that's pretty much it.
You have to.
Yeah, I got it, Marshall.
Okay, thanks.
All right, thanks.